They humiliated an elderly man thinking he was a beggar until his true identity was revealed. He was treated like trash by employees who believe they are too important to see who truly matters. Ignored, pushed aside, and silenced, no one noticed that the nuisance knew more about the company than all of them combined. When his identity was revealed, the embarrassment couldn't fit inside their ties, and everyone's mask fell. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. And now, on with the story. Monday morning arrived with that typical New York City rush. The traffic on Park Avenue was intense, as always, and the Pathways corporate tower rose majestically among the countless other glass and concrete skyscrapers. It was a symbol of success, a 30-story tower that housed one of the most respected consulting firms in the country. Inside, everything breathed efficiency. The hallways gleamed, the receptionists wore impeccable uniforms, and executives moved with firm steps, carrying their laptops and packed schedules. On that April morning, however, something different was about to happen. When the glass doors opened at 7:30, a man entered slowly. He was in his late 70s, maybe 80. He wore worn-out slacks, a white shirt yellowed with age, and a brown blazer that had seen better days. His shoes, though clean, were scuffed at the toes. His white hair was neatly combed, but the simplicity of his appearance contrasted sharply with the luxury of the environment. Danielle, the morning receptionist, looked up from her computer screen and watched the man approach. He walked slowly, as if carrying the weight of many decades on his back. He carried no briefcase, held no cell phone, and didn't seem rushed like everyone else who crossed that lobby. He just walked, with a calm and serene gaze. "Good morning," he said, stopping in front of the black granite counter. Danielle hesitated. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you?" The man smiled faintly. "I'm here to resolve something that began a long time ago." The receptionist blinked, confused. "Do you have a meeting scheduled? I'll need the name of the person you're here to see." He shook, his head gently. "I don't have a meeting, but I need to be here. It's important." Danielle felt a growing unease. She glanced around, looking for support, but the security guards were busy checking the badges of arriving employees. "Sir, this is a private company. If you don't have a scheduled appointment, you can't wait in the lobby." The man continued to smile but didn't move. "I'll only be a little while. I won't bother anyone." And then, without waiting for a response, he walked over to one of the leather benches near the large glass windows. He sat down, carefully, like someone who knows his own body well, and simply stayed there watching the movement outside. Danielle exchanged a look with Jefferson, the nearest security guard. He frowned and walked over. "Can I help you, sir?" The man turned his face to him. "No need to worry, I'm just waiting." Waiting for what? The right moment. Jefferson crossed his arms. "Look, with all due respect, but if you don't have any business here, you're going to have to leave." The man didn't answer. He just turned his gaze back to the street as if the conversation didn't exist. Jefferson sighed, annoyed, but before he could insist, a group of executives hurried past and he had to return to his post. The minutes dragged on. Employees began to notice the strange presence. Some changed their path to avoid him. Others whispered among themselves. A woman in high heels and a navy blue pantsuit commented to her colleague, without bothering to lower her voice, "What do you think that man is doing here? He looks lost." Her colleague chuckled softly. "He's probably confused. Poor thing, at his age, he probably can't get his bearings." It was almost 9 o'clock when Marina arrived. She was young, 26, and had been working in the Human Resources Department for 2 years. Her brown hair was tied in a simple bun, and she carried a worn handbag her mother had given her. Marina didn't come from a wealthy family. She had earned this job through sheer effort, studying at night while working another job during the day. Now, finally, she felt like she was building something solid. As she crossed the lobby, Marina noticed the man sitting on the bench. He was motionless, his hands resting on his knees, his gaze lost in the vastness of the avenue outside. Something about the scene touched her. She couldn't explain what it was. Maybe his calmness, maybe his loneliness, Or maybe the fact that everyone around seemed bothered by his presence, yet no one approached him to actually talk. Marina slowed her pace. For a moment, she thought about going over and asking if he was okay. But then she remembered she had a meeting in 15 minutes and that Jennifer, her supervisor, hated tardiness. She quickened her step and got into the elevator. Up on the 12th floor, the atmosphere was even more pristine. Offices with frosted glass doors, ornamental plants in the corners, abstract paintings on the walls. Marina greeted a few colleagues and headed to the conference room, where Jennifer was already waiting with an impatient expression. "You're 3 minutes late, Marina." "Sorry, Jennifer, the subway was packed." Jennifer sighed, flipping through some papers. "We have a lot to do today. Dr. Anderson wants to review all the contractor agreements by the end of the week. I need you to organize the files and sort the expirations by priority." Marina nodded, taking the folders she was handed. "I'll get on it right now." "And Marina," Jennifer looked up, serious. "Be careful with that tendency of yours to get emotionally involved with everything. Here we need results, not sentimentality." Marina felt her face flush, but she just nodded and left the room. As she walked back to her workstation, she thought about the man in the lobby. Was he still there? Had anyone even offered him a glass of water? The hours passed. Marina dove into reports, numbers, and endless spreadsheets. But every now and then, her thoughts returned to that image. The solitary man sitting amidst the frantic motion of a world that seemed to have no time for anyone. At noon, Marina went down for lunch. The building had a cafe on the second floor, but she preferred to bring a packed lunch from home. More economical, healthier. She took the elevator, and when the doors opened on the ground floor, her heart skipped a beat. The man was still there, sitting on the same bench in the same position, as if time hadn't passed for him. But now there was a different mood in the air. Danielle was talking quietly with another security guard, discreetly pointing in his direction. Two executives in suits were talking near the entrance, casting disapproving glances. Marina felt a pang of anger. Why did this bother people so much? The man wasn't asking for anything, wasn't bothering anyone. He was just existing there, occupying a space that seemed reserved only for those who wore expensive clothes and carried important titles. She walked toward the exit, but before going through the doors, she stopped. She turned and looked at him again. This time, as if feeling the weight of her gaze, the man turned his head and his eyes met Marina's. It was a second, maybe less, but in that brief meeting of eyes, Marina felt something she couldn't name. It wasn't pity, it wasn't curiosity, it was recognition, as if in some strange way she understood what he was doing there, as if she knew, deep down, that his silent presence carried an immense weight. She almost approached him. Almost. But then she heard someone call her name. "Marina." It was Chris, a colleague from the finance department. He was hurrying over, a sandwich in his hand. "Grabbing lunch? Let's walk over to the park together." Marina hesitated but ended up agreeing. They walked on, but before she went through the door, she glanced back one last time. The man had returned his gaze to the street, impassive, like a statue of patience and serenity in the midst of chaos. During lunch, Marina could barely make conversation. Chris talked about baseball, about the weekend, about a promotion he was competing for, but she only responded with monosyllables. Her mind was stuck in that lobby, on that bench, with that man. When they returned to the building, he was still there. Jennifer appeared shortly after, coming from an off-site meeting. As she crossed the lobby, she saw the man and frowned. She stopped next to Danielle. "Who is that man?" Danielle lowered her voice. "I don't know, Jennifer. He showed up this morning and won't leave. Said he needs to be here. We already had Jefferson talk to him, but he doesn't give a straight answer." Jennifer rolled her eyes. "This is unacceptable. I'm going to have security handle this. We can't have just anyone taking up space in our building." Marina, who was passing by at that moment, overheard the conversation and felt her blood boil. Just anyone. As if that man were a problem, a nuisance, a stain on the perfection of that environment. She said nothing. She just went upstairs, returned to her desk, and tried to focus on her work. But she couldn't. With every report she opened, every spreadsheet she filled, the image of that man returned to her mind. The day ended slowly. At 5:30, Marina packed her things and went downstairs. When she reached the ground floor, she noticed the bench was empty. The man was gone. She felt a strange relief, but also a pang of disappointment. The next day, Marina woke up early and took the crowded subway as usual. She entered the building at 7:40, greeted Danielle and headed for the elevator. But before she pressed the button, she sensed a presence beside her. She turned. It was him. The elderly man was standing a few feet away, wearing the same clothes as the day before. But his gaze was even calmer, even more serene, as if he were exactly where he was supposed to be. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft. Marina swallowed hard. "Good morning." He smiled slightly but said nothing more. He just walked to the same bench and sat down, folding his hands in his lap. Marina got into the elevator, but before the doors closed, she looked at him one more time. And this time, she made a decision. She didn't know what she would do yet, but she knew she couldn't just ignore him. As the doors slid shut, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Upstairs, the routine continued. Meetings, calls, emails. Jennifer was particularly irritated. Dr. Anderson, the company's CEO, had sent out a memo demanding they resolve the issue of the inconvenient visitor once and for all. He couldn't stay there, taking up space, causing discomfort. Jennifer called Marina in to talk. "I need you to go down to the reception desk and speak with that man. Find out what he wants. If it's some kind of social issue, we can refer him to an assistance program, but he cannot stay here." Marina felt her heart race. "Why me?" "Because you're in HR and you know how to deal with people. Be gentle, but be firm." Marina went downstairs slowly, her heart pounding. When she reached the lobby, she saw the man exactly where she expected to find him. She took a deep breath and approached. "Excuse me, sir." He looked up. "Hello?" Marina sat down next to him, keeping a respectful distance. "My name is Marina. I work here at the company. I wanted to see if I could help you in any way." The man looked her in the eyes, as if gauging the sincerity of her words. After a long silence, he said, "My name is Samuel." "A pleasure, Mr. Samuel." Marina hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I noticed you've been coming here. Are you looking for someone specific?" Samuel smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I'm looking for something that was lost." Marina frowned. "Something." "Humanity," he said simply. Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. The words were simple, but they carried an immense weight. Before she could respond, Samuel continued, "You know, Marina, many years ago this company was built with a purpose. It wasn't just about profit. It was about people, about dignity, about seeing one another." Marina remained silent, absorbing every word. "But over time things change. People forget. And I needed to know if anything was left of what once existed here." "Who are you?" Marina asked, her voice almost a whisper. Samuel didn't answer. He just turned his gaze back to the street, as if he carried memories that weighed more than any answer could express. Marina stayed there, sitting beside him in silence. She didn't have the answers Jennifer wanted. She didn't have the firmness she'd been asked for. She only had questions, and a growing certainty that this man was not who everyone thought he was. She studied Samuel's profile, the deep wrinkles around his eyes, the time-worn hands, the long, thin fingers that looked like they had held important things in the past. There was a dignity about him that no expensive suit could buy, a wisdom that no degree could teach. "Did you used to work here?" Marina asked, almost without thinking. Samuel took a moment to reply. When he did, his voice was as soft as an autumn breeze. "I've worked in many places, but this one always held a special meaning. Why? Because it was built with love, and true love leaves marks that time cannot erase." Marina felt her eyes sting. She didn't know why those words touched her so deeply, but they did. Maybe because, amidst all the hustle, all the obsession with results and targets, she herself had forgotten what it meant to do something with love. "I have to get back to work," she said, standing up slowly. But if you need anything, you can find me." Samuel nodded. "Thank you, Marina. Your kindness has not gone unnoticed." When she got back upstairs, Jennifer was waiting impatiently. "Well?" Marina hesitated. "He said he's looking for something." "Something? What kind of answer is that, Marina?" "It's the only one he gave me." Jennifer sighed, exasperated. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to speak with security myself." But Jennifer stopped before leaving and looked at Marina with a cold expression. "And you, Marina, be careful with this kind of emotional involvement. It's not HR's job to play therapist to strangers." Marina nodded, but inside something was changing. She didn't know what it was yet, but she knew she could no longer just pretend Samuel didn't exist. That afternoon, something unexpected happened. A courier arrived carrying heavy boxes. He was young, maybe 20, and sweating under the weight of the load. He stopped at the reception desk, out of breath, and asked where he should leave the delivery. Danielle pointed to the service elevator. "Down the hall, you can take it straight up." The young man nodded, but when he tried to lift the boxes again, he staggered. They were too heavy. No one moved to help him. Executives rushed past, avoiding eye contact. Danielle went back to her computer. A woman in high heels walked so close she almost bumped into the boxes, but didn't even glance at the courier, focused only on her phone. It was then that Samuel stood up. He walked over to the young man and, without a word, took one of the boxes. The courier looked at him, surprised. "Sir, you don't have to—" But Samuel was already walking toward the service elevator. The young man, with no other choice, followed him. Marina watched the two of them walk side by side. A young worker, sweaty and tired, an elderly man in worn clothes, offering help without expecting anything in return. It was an image that contrasted violently with everything around them. When they reached the elevator, the courier tried to thank him. "Thank you so much, sir. Seriously, you didn't have to do that." Samuel smiled. "We should always help when we can. It's how we make the world a little better." The young man nodded, moved. "God bless you, sir." The elevator doors closed and Samuel walked back down the hall. A few employees watched him, but no one said anything. No one thanked him. No one acknowledged the gesture. Marina, who had come down to get a document, saw everything. She saw Samuel's quiet kindness. She saw the indifference of everyone around. And she felt, for the first time in that place, a deep shame. Shame for being part of a system that celebrated numbers but ignored people. Shame for having taken so long to see what was so clearly in front of her eyes. That night, on her way home on the crowded subway, Marina couldn't stop thinking. She thought about Samuel sitting alone on that bench. She thought about his words on love and the marks that time can't erase. She thought about her own life, her own choices. Was she building something with love, or just surviving like so many others in the gears of a system that didn't care about anyone? When she arrived at her small apartment in Queens, she found her mother, Celia, making dinner. Marina had lived with her mother ever since her father left years ago. It was just the two of them, supporting each other, helping each other. "Honey, you look troubled," Celia said, serving rice onto a plate. "Did something happen at work?" Marina told her about Samuel, about how everyone treated him, about his gesture with the courier, about the words he had said. Celia listened in silence, stirring the beans on the stove. When Marina finished, her mother smiled sadly. "That man knows something most people have forgotten, honey. Be careful you don't forget, too." Marina nodded, but inside she knew something was changing. She could no longer just accept things as they were. When Samuel returned, he said nothing. He just went back to the bench and sat down as if nothing had happened. But for Marina, everything had changed. She finally understood what Samuel was looking for, and for the first time she wondered if this company deserved to be found. The third day dawned overcast over New York City. Marina woke up earlier than usual, with a weight on her chest she couldn't name. As she made coffee in the small apartment kitchen, her mother watched her attentively. "You barely slept, honey, I heard. You tossing and turning all night." Marina sighed, stirring sugar into her mug. "I can't stop thinking about that man, Mom. About Mr. Samuel." Celia sat down at the table, her calloused hands holding her own mug. And what are you going to do? I don't know. But I know I can't pretend I don't see what's happening. Her mother nodded slowly. Just be careful, Marina. You fought so hard to get that job. Don't throw it all away because of... Because of what, Mom? The truth? Decency? Celia didn't answer. She just squeezed her daughter's hand affectionately. A gesture. That said more than 1,000 words ever could. When Marina arrived at the building at 8:30, Samuel was already there, sitting on the same bench, with the same tranquil posture, as if it were his natural place in the world. She paused for a moment before entering, watching him through the glass. There was something profoundly peaceful about him, as if he carried a certainty that no one else in that building possessed. As she crossed the lobby, Marina greeted Danielle with a nod. The receptionist was visibly tense. She had the phone pressed to her ear and was speaking in a low, urgent tone. Marina managed to catch a few words. Situation. Untenable. Take action. She went up to the 12th floor with a heavy heart. She knew something was about to happen. She could feel it in the air, in the way people were talking in small groups, in the grim expressions of the managers. Jennifer called her over as soon as she saw her. Marina, I need to talk to you. Now. They went into an empty conference room. Jennifer closed the door with more force than necessary and turned to Marina, her arms crossed. Doctor, Anderson has called an emergency meeting for 10 o'clock about that man who's been occupying our reception area. Mr. Samuel, Marina said, and immediately realized her mistake when she saw Jennifer's expression harden. Whatever his name is, Marina, he's become a problem. We're getting complaints from clients, from employees. It's affecting the company's image. But he's not doing anything wrong. He's not doing anything, period. And that's the problem. Jennifer sighed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair. Look, Marina, I get that you're a sensitive person, but this isn't a place for charity. We have responsibilities. We have a reputation to uphold. Marina felt anger rise in her throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. And what about our responsibility to people? Doesn't that count? Jennifer looked at her as if she didn't understand the question. The people we have a responsibility to are our employees, our clients, our shareholders, not every random stranger who decides to plant himself in our lobby. Marina wanted to scream, wanted to shake Jennifer and ask when exactly she had become so cold, but she just nodded and left the room, her heart pounding too hard. At 10 o'clock, Marina was summoned to the meeting on the 18th floor in the executive boardroom. It was the first time she had been up that high in the building. The atmosphere there was even more oppressive. Expensive paintings on the walls, imported furniture, a privileged view of Park Avenue. Dr. Anderson was seated at the head of the table. He was in his early 50s with impeccably styled graying hair, an Italian suit, and an expression that seemed carved from marble. Beside him were 3 other directors and Jennifer. Marina sat at the end of the table, feeling small and out of place. All right, let's get straight to the point, Dr. Anderson began, his voice deep and authoritative. We have an untenable situation on the ground floor. An individual with no defined purpose has been occupying our space for 3 days. This is unacceptable. We've tried to speak with him, sir, said one of the security directors, but he's unperturbed. He just says he needs to fulfill something. Dr. Anderson tapped his fingers on the table, impatient. And you believe that? He's probably some kind of disturbed person or a con artist. We need to remove him, elegantly, but firmly. It was then that Marina heard her own voice, before she even realized she was going to speak. With all due respect, Dr. Anderson, but what if he's telling the truth? The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. All eyes turned to her. Jennifer shot her a death glare. Dr. Anderson leaned forward, his hands clasped. Explain yourself, Ms. Marina Hayes, from the Human Resources Department. Very well, Marina Hayes. What truth would that be? Marina swallowed hard but didn't back down. He said he's looking for something that was lost, and when I asked what, he answered, humanity. Dr. Anderson let out a short, humorless laugh. Humanity? How dramatic. And you believe that? I believe he deserves to be listened to carefully, not just dismissed as a problem. The director leaned back in his chair, his eyes studying Marina as if she were a defective part that needed to be fixed or discarded. I'm going to be very clear with you, Marina. This company was built on hard work, discipline, and results, not on cheap sentimentality. If you want to do charity, do it on your own time. Here you represent an institution that has standards to maintain. Marina felt her face burn, but she held his gaze. I understand, sir. Good. Jennifer, arrange for the discreet removal of this individual. Hire private security if necessary. I want this resolved by tomorrow. The meeting ended, and everyone filed out. Marina was the last to leave, her legs trembling. As she rode the elevator down, she felt tears sting her eyes, but she wouldn't let them fall. Not there. Not yet. When she reached the ground floor, she looked for Samuel. He was there, as always, but this time he wasn't alone. There was a man beside him, simply dressed, talking, animatedly. Marina approached and recognized the courier from the day before. So, Mr. Samuel, the young man was saying, I brought you some lunch, a sandwich and some juice. I know you helped me out yesterday, and I wanted to pay you back. Samuel smiled, touched. You didn't have to, my boy, but I thank you from the bottom of my heart. The courier said goodbye and left, leaving the lunch in a paper bag next to Samuel. Marina sat down beside him, without asking for permission this time. You've made a friend, she said. Samuel opened the bag and offered half the sandwich to Marina. Want to share? She hesitated but ended up accepting. They ate in silence for a few minutes. It was a simple ham and cheese sandwich, but it tasted like something more. It tasted like care, like reciprocity, like humanity. Mr. Samuel, Marina began, her voice low, they're going to try to remove you tomorrow. Samuel didn't seem surprised. I know. And you're going to leave? He looked at her with those calm, deep eyes. I'm going to do what I need to do, Marina, and you? What do you mean? Are you also going to do what you need to do, or are you going to keep just following orders? Marina felt the words like a punch to the gut. It wasn't an accusation. It was an honest question, and that's why it hurt even more. I don't know what to do, she admitted, her voice trembling. I'm scared. I need this job. My mum depends on me. Samuel nodded slowly. I understand. But sometimes, Marina, the biggest fear isn't losing your job. It's losing yourself in the process of keeping it. Marina felt the tears finally escape. She couldn't hold them back, and Samuel, with a gentle gesture, offered her an old but clean cloth handkerchief. She dried her eyes, feeling strangely comforted. You're not an ordinary man, she said. Who are you, really? Samuel smiled, but didn't answer. He just said, We're all ordinary, Marina. The difference is in who we choose to be when no one is looking. The rest of the day passed in a strange haze. Marina tried to work, but she couldn't concentrate. She saw Jennifer talking with security guards, making calls, organizing the removal. She saw colleagues commenting on the strange man who would finally be taken away, and she felt a growing nausea in her stomach. At 5 o'clock she went downstairs again. Samuel was still there, but now there was more activity around him. 3 private security guards, hired specially for the job, were talking with Jefferson. They were planning their approach for the next day. Marina overheard fragments of the conversation, words like minimal force, discretion, and efficient removal. Her stomach churned. Marina approached Samuel. They're getting ready. I know, he said calmly, without taking his eyes off the movement on the street. Why don't you just leave beforehand? Why do you insist on staying? Samuel looked at her with an intensity that made her step back. Because promises are sacred, Marina, and I made a promise a long time ago, a promise to someone I loved more than life itself. What promise? He looked up at the top of the building, his eyes shining with memories that seemed to dance in his mind like gentle ghosts. To come back, to see if what we built together still had meaning, to honor what she believed in. She, Marina asked softly, almost whispering. My wife. Helen. Samuel closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, Marina saw unshed tears there. She passed away a few years ago, but before she left, she made me promise I would come back here, not as the owner, not as a director, but as any ordinary person, to see if we were still capable of seeing those who need to be seen. Marina felt a shiver run down her spine. Owner? Director? What are you talking about? Samuel smiled sadly, a smile laden with decades of untold stories. Tomorrow, you'll understand, Marina. Tomorrow everyone will understand. Marina wanted to ask more questions, but something in Samuel's expression stopped her. There was a finality to that moment, as if they were on the edge of a cliff and the next step would take them to a place from which there was no return. She stayed there for a few more minutes in silence, just sharing his presence. When she finally stood up to leave, Samuel lightly held her hand. Thank you for seeing me, Marina. Thank you for remembering that there is still kindness in this place. The words were like an embrace. Marina nodded, unable to speak, and left the building with a heavy heart. That night, Marina could barely eat dinner. Celia noticed her daughter's state and sat beside her, pushing away the plate of food Marina was just poking at listlessly. You need to make a decision, honey, about which side you want to be on. Marina looked at her mother, her eyes full of tears. What if I choose the wrong side? What if I lose everything? Celia held her daughter's face in both her hands, those hands that had worked so hard, that had cleaned so many houses, that had raised a daughter alone. Honey, you can lose a lot of things in life, a job, money, status, but if you lose your dignity, your ethics, your humanity, then you'll have lost everything. And then, my dear, all the money in the world won't buy back who you were. Marina hugged her mother and cried. She cried for the fear, the pressure, the uncertainty, but she also cried because deep down she already knew what she had to do. She just didn't know yet if she would have enough courage to face the consequences. She remembered when she was a child, and her mother taught her the importance of looking people in the eye, of seeing beyond appearances, of treating the janitor with the same respect she would a doctor. When had she forgotten that? When had she started measuring people by the size of their ID badges? That night, Marina barely slept. She stared at the ceiling, mentally replaying all her conversations with Samuel. Every word of his echoed in her mind like a bell tolling in an empty cathedral. Humanity, promises, Helen, see who needs to be seen. At 3 in the morning, she got up and went to the drawer where she kept her documents. There, among certificates and contracts, she found an old photo. It was from the day she got the job. She was smiling, her eyes shining with hope. She looked at that past Marina and wondered, what would she say about who I've become? The next morning, the 4th day, Marina woke with a determination she hadn't felt in a long time. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple but dignified outfit. She looked at herself in the mirror and took a deep breath, speaking softly to her own reflection. Today's the day everything changes. Before leaving, she hugged her mother tightly. Celia held her daughter's face and said, her voice thick with emotion, "Be strong, my girl, be true, we'll figure out the rest later." Marina nodded and left, her heart beating like a war drum. When she arrived at the building, the scene was completely different from usual. There were more people than normal. Luxury cars were parked out front, with suited chauffeurs waiting. Extra security guards were positioned strategically. A red carpet was being unrolled at the entrance. Marina quickly understood why. It was the day of the company's annual event, the Vision and Results Summit. The day investors, partners, and important figures from New York's business elite visited the building. Business journalists were also present. The worst possible day for any kind of problem. The day the company's image had to be impeccable. And Samuel was there, on the same bench, in the same simple clothes, with the same impossible calm like a rock in the middle of a raging river. Marina saw Dr. Anderson get out of a black Mercedes, accompanied by other executives in Italian suits. She saw the look of restrained fury when he spotted Samuel. His jaw tightened. She saw Jennifer running over to explain, gesturing nervously, that the removal was scheduled to happen before the day's activities began, in half an hour. Dr. Anderson said something in a low voice. Marina couldn't hear the exact words, but she read his lips. Handle this now. And it was in that moment that Marina made her final decision. She walked over to Samuel and, in front of everyone, sat down beside him. Good morning, Mr. Samuel. Good morning, Marina. Today is an important day. I know, and that's why I'm here. Samuel smiled, and for the first time, Marina saw a genuine emotion in his eyes. It was gratitude, and also sadness, as if he knew the price she was about to pay. The guests began to arrive, well-dressed men and women with rehearsed smiles and firm handshakes. They passed through the lobby without even glancing at the bench where Marina and Samuel were sitting, or when they did look, it was with poorly disguised contempt. It was then that Dr. Anderson approached, flanked by the private security guards. His voice was low but charged with authority. Sir, the event is starting. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Samuel didn't move. He just looked at Dr. Anderson with that unnerving calm. And if I don't want to? Then we will have to remove you, as politely as possible, but we will remove you. Marina stood up, her heart pounding. Dr. Anderson, please, don't do this. The director looked at her as if she were invisible. Ms. Hayes, I suggest you return to your post. Immediately. I won't let you do this. The tension in the air was palpable. Everyone around stopped to watch. The guests, the employees, the security guards. A heavy silence fell over the lobby. Dr. Anderson took a step forward. Last chance, sir. Leave voluntarily or you will be escorted out. Samuel finally stood up, but not to leave. He rose slowly, his posture erect despite his years, his gaze fixed on Dr. Anderson. There was a natural authority about him that no job title could confer. And then, with a voice that echoed throughout the lobby, filled with decades of experience and suffering and love, he said, My name is Samuel Pathways, and this company was built by my hands and the heart of my wife, Helen. I came here not as the owner, but as an ordinary man, to see if you still recognize humanity when it's standing right in front of you. And today I finally have my answer. The silence that followed was absolute. Marina felt the floor disappear from under her feet, as if the entire world had stopped spinning. Pathways. The last name was engraved on the building's name, on the company's name, on bronze plaques, on certificates, on everything. Samuel Pathways wasn't just the founder, he was the legend, the man who had started with nothing and built an empire based on values. The man who had disappeared years ago after his wife Helen passed away, leaving the management in the hands of others. The man everyone thought would never return. But there he was, back, exactly as he had promised Helen. Dr. Anderson turned ashen, as if he had seen a ghost. His hands were trembling slightly. Mr. Pathways, I didn't... The words died in his throat. Around them the guests began to whisper. Some knew who Samuel was only from stories. Others recognized him from old photos that still decorated some hallways on the upper floors. The tension in the air was so thick it seemed hard to breathe. Jennifer was paralyzed, her face as white as a sheet. The private security guard stepped back, confused. Danielle, the receptionist, brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes wide. Marina felt tears stream down her face. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of understanding, of revelation, of relief for having chosen the right side, even without fully knowing who she was defending. And as everyone processed the revelation that had just turned their day upside down, Samuel remained standing, serene as ever, carrying on his back the weight of a fulfilled promise and in his hands the uncertain future of everything he and Helen had built together. The lobby of the Pathways corporate tower had never experienced a silence so profound. It was as if the very air had stopped circulating, holding its breath along with everyone present. Samuel remained standing in the center of the space, a small, simple figure who suddenly seemed to fill the entire room with his presence. Dr. Anderson, the man who had run the company with an iron fist for 5 years, was as pale as wax. His hands, always so steady in meetings and negotiations, were visibly shaking. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, like a fish out of water gasping for air. Samuel walked slowly to one of the lobby walls, where a large bronze plaque gleamed under the lights. Engraved on it in elegant letters were the words, Pathways Consulting. Founded in 1984 by Samuel and Helen Pathways, built on the values of integrity, respect, and humanity. He ran his fingers over the engraved words, an almost affectionate gesture. Then, he turned to face everyone. My wife and I started this company in a 200-square-foot office with a borrowed desk and a huge dream. Helen always used to say, Samuel, if we're going to build something, let's build something that honors people. Not just the ones who pay our bills, but everyone who crosses our path. Marina watched, tears still streaming silently down her face. She felt as if she were witnessing something sacred, a moment that would change not just that day, but the course of many lives. Samuel continued, his voice gaining strength. For 3 decades, we tried to keep that promise. It wasn't easy. There were times when the market pressured us to change, to become colder, more calculating. But Helen always reminded me, the day we stop seeing people, we will have lost everything. He paused, his eyes scanning each face in the room. Then 5 years ago, Helen got sick, and before she passed, she asked 2 things of me. The first, that I not let my grief consume me. The second, that I come back one day disguised as someone invisible to see if the heart of the company was still beating. Dr. Anderson finally found his words. Mr. Pathways, we didn't know. If we had known you were... If you had known, Samuel interrupted gently but firmly, you would have treated me differently. And that is precisely the problem, Dr. Anderson. An organization that only respects those with power doesn't have values. It only has interests. Jennifer, who until then had been frozen beside one of the pillars, took a step forward, her voice trembling. Mr. Pathways, with all due respect, but the market has changed. Companies need to be efficient, productive. We can't what? Samuel looked directly into her eyes. We can't treat people with dignity. We can't see beyond the clothes they wear. Tell me, Jennifer, when was the last time you spoke with someone from the cleaning staff? When was the last time you thanked someone who couldn't offer you anything in return? Jennifer turned pale and looked down, speechless. It was then that one of the investors present, a man in his 60s in an impeccable grey suit, stepped forward. His name was Richard Miller, one of the company's largest shareholders. Samuel, he said, his voice controlled but curious, I understand your position. But you have to understand that this is 2024. The business world is brutal. If we're not competitive, we'll be devoured by the competition. Samuel nodded slowly. Richard, I've known you since you invested your first shares here 15 years ago. Do you remember what I told you back then? Richard frowned, thinking. You said that sustainable profit comes from loyalty, not exploitation. Exactly, and I still believe that. The difference, Richard, between a company that lasts and one that burns out isn't in the short-term numbers. It's in how much people believe in it, and people only believe in what sees them. The investor fell silent, absorbing the words. Marina watched everything with a mix of admiration and fear. Admiration for Samuel, for his quiet courage, for his clarity of purpose, fear for the consequences that would surely follow, for her, for everyone. Samuel then walked over to his blazer, which was folded over the bench where he had spent 4 days sitting. From one of the pockets, he pulled out a small, worn leather folder. He opened it carefully as if handling something precious. From inside, he took out a few sheets of paper, yellowed with age, covered in a delicate, feminine handwriting. These are letters Helen wrote during her final months. He held up the papers so everyone could see, even from a distance. She knew she was leaving. And she spent those months not just saying goodbye, but also leaving instructions, not about business, about values. Samuel began to read, his voice thick with emotion, but steady. My beloved Samuel, if you are reading this, it means you have kept your promise to return. And if you've reached this point, I imagine things are not as we dreamed. Don't be too saddened. The world is in a hurry to forget what matters. But you can remind them. Here are my suggestions, not as orders but as seeds that can be planted if there are hearts. willing to cultivate them. He paused, discreetly wiping away a tear that threatened to fall. Then he continued reading the points Helen had listed. Each item was a vision for a more humane company, empathy training for leadership, role-swapping programs, where executives would experience operational work for a few days, emergency funds for employees in hardship, channels for genuine listening, not just bureaucratic formalities, and, above all, the creation of a memorial in the entrance hall, reminding everyone that there no one would be invisible. Marina listened to every word as if it were gospel. It was exactly what the world needed to hear, exactly what she herself needed to hear. When Samuel finished reading, he carefully folded the letters and looked at Dr. Anderson. "For these 4 days," I observed, "I saw efficiency, yes, I saw results too, but I saw no soul. And a company without a soul may survive, but it will never truly live." Dr. Anderson was visibly shaken. His shoulders, always so straight, seemed hunched under an invisible weight. "Mr. Pathways," he began, his voice hoarse, I took over this company with the mission of making it profitable, and I succeeded. The numbers, Samuel interrupted softly, "were never the problem, Dr. Anderson. The problem was the price you exacted from people to achieve them." It was at that moment that Marina felt a hand lightly touch her shoulder. She turned and saw Celia, her mother, standing behind her. She had arrived without Marina noticing, perhaps alerted by an employee or simply following a mother's instinct that senses when her child is in need. "Mom," Marina whispered, surprised, "what are you doing here? You think I was going to let my daughter face this alone?" Celia smiled, squeezing her daughter's shoulder affectionately. Her mother's presence gave Marina renewed strength. She straightened up, wiped her tears, and took a step forward. "Mr. Pathways," her voice rang out clearly across the lobby, making everyone turn to her. "I want to help. I want to be part of this rebuilding, if you'll let me." Samuel looked at her with a gentle smile. "Marina, you're already helping. From the first moment you chose to see me as a person and not as a problem, you were already rebuilding." It was then that something unexpected happened. Danielle, the receptionist, left her post and walked slowly to the center of the lobby. Her face was wet with tears. "I want to apologize too, Mr. Pathways," she sobbed. "I saw you here every day and I did nothing. I didn't offer you water. I didn't offer you a better place to sit. I didn't offer to listen. I only saw a problem." Samuel walked over to her and, with a surprising gesture of tenderness, held her hands. "Acknowledgement is the first step, Danielle, and it takes far more courage to admit a mistake than to pretend it never happened." Other employees began to approach, some to apologize, others to simply listen. The lobby, which moments before had been a space of tension and revelation, transformed into something different, a space of connection. But not everyone was receptive. Dr. Anderson remained distant, his arms crossed, his expression closed off. And beside him, Jennifer and 2 other directors maintained the same defensive posture. Samuel watched them for a long moment. Then he walked over to them. "Dr. Anderson, I didn't come here to destroy what you've built in terms of results. I came to rebuild what was lost in terms of values, and for that I need your help or your departure." The ultimatum landed like a lightning bolt. Dr. Anderson stiffened. "Are you firing me? I'm offering you a choice. You can be part of this transformation, learn, change, grow, or you can leave with a generous severance package and an honest recommendation, but you cannot continue to lead in the same way." The silence between them was heavy. Marina held her breath, waiting for the answer. Dr. Anderson finally spoke, his voice controlled but tense. "I worked for 5 years to put this company at the top of the rankings. 5 years sacrificing time, health, family, and now you come and tell me it was all for nothing." "It wasn't for nothing," Samuel replied calmly, "but it was incomplete. You built the structure. Now we need to build the heart." Dr. Anderson stared at him for several long seconds. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the elevator. Jennifer and the other 2 directors followed him, their footsteps echoing on the polished marble. When the elevator doors closed, Samuel sighed deeply. There was sadness in his eyes, but also determination. He then looked at Richard Miller, the investor. "Richard, as the primary shareholder, I need your support for what comes next." Richard studied Samuel for a moment, then surprisingly he smiled. "Samuel, when I invested in this company, it was because I believed in your values. Over time, I admit, I forgot them, focused only on returns. But today, you reminded me why I invested in the first place. You have my support." Samuel nodded, grateful. "From now on, things are going to change, and it will be difficult. Some will resist, others will leave. But those who stay will be part of something bigger than profit. They will be part of a legacy." Marina felt a deep emotion wash over her. It was as if she were witnessing the birth of something new, something necessary. Samuel then announced to everyone present, "Starting today, I am beginning a process of transformation in this company. I will temporarily resume the role of CEO. We will review our practices, our values, our way of treating people. And we will do this not because it's nice, but because it's right." Applause echoed through the lobby. It wasn't rehearsed or polite applause. It was genuine, emotional applause. Marina clapped loudly, tears rolling freely down her face. Celia, beside her, was also applauding, proud of the daughter she had raised. In the hours that followed, Samuel called an extraordinary meeting with all departments. Marina was invited to participate, something she never would have imagined possible just a week ago. She sat in the large conference room alongside managers, directors, and team leads. Samuel was at the head of the table, but his presence wasn't imposing. It was welcoming. "I want to hear from each of you," he began. "I want to know what works, what doesn't, where we lost our way. And I want honesty, not flattery." What followed was one of the most candid conversations that room had ever witnessed. Employees spoke of excessive pressure, impossible targets, the feeling of being treated like numbers. Others spoke of the pride they felt in the company, but also the sadness of seeing it become a cold place. Marina listened attentively, and when it was her turn to speak, she took a deep breath. "Mr. Pathways," she began, "I think the biggest problem is that we forgot we are people dealing with people. We became robots trying to hit targets without remembering that every number on a spreadsheet represents someone with dreams, fears, families." Samuel nodded. "And what do you propose, Marina?" "I propose we start small, with simple gestures, learning everyone's names, not just their titles, asking how they are, for real, creating spaces where people can speak without fear of retaliation, and most importantly, that leadership sets the example." Several heads nodded around the table. Samuel smiled. "Then that's where we'll begin." When the meeting ended, it was late at night. The building was almost empty, with just a few security guards making their rounds and cleaning staff working quietly. Marina was walking through the hallways with her mother when Samuel caught up. To them, his step still firm despite the long day. "Marina, may I speak with you for a moment?" "Of course, sir." They sat on one of the lobby sofas, the same one where Marina had first observed Samuel. Celia stood a little way off, flipping through an old magazine, giving them privacy but staying close. Samuel looked at Marina with those wise eyes that seemed to have seen far more than anyone should in a lifetime. "You know things are going to be difficult, don't you?" Marina nodded, her hands clasped in her lap. "I know. They'll say we're naive, that we're losing money, that we won't survive in a competitive market. They'll question every decision, every change. Some will actively resist. Others will leave." "I know," she repeated, but with more firmness this time. "But I'd rather try and fail than succeed without a soul. I learned that today. I learned it from you." Samuel smiled, visibly touched. "Helen would have liked you very much, Marina. In fact, she would have insisted that you be part of the leadership for this new phase. She had a gift for recognizing genuine courage when she saw it." Marina's eyes widened, her heart racing. "Sir, I'm just an HR analyst. I barely have 3 years of experience. There are people far more qualified." "Technical qualifications I can hire," Samuel interrupted gently. "But character, integrity, the courage to do what's right even when it's hard, they don't teach that in any MBA program. And you demonstrated you have those qualities when it mattered most." He extended his hand. I would like you to be my direct assistant in this transformation process. We're going to need someone who understands both HR processes and the human heart." Marina looked at his outstretched hand, then at her mother, who was smiling proudly from a distance, then back at Samuel. For a moment, fear almost paralyzed her. It was so much responsibility, so much pressure, so much visibility. But then she remembered the 4 days of watching Samuel be ignored, scorned, treated as invisible. She remembered her own decision to stand by his side, even without knowing who he was. And she realized she had already made the hardest choice. Accepting this offer was just continuing on the same path. And so, with her heart pounding but her certainty unshakable, she shook his hand. "It would be an honor, Mr. Pathways. An honor and a responsibility I will carry with the utmost respect." That night, when Marina and Celia returned home, the moon was shining over New York, its silver light reflecting off the glass buildings that dominated the urban landscape. The small apartment in Queens had never felt so welcoming. Every simple piece of furniture, every photo on the wall, every mark of time now seemed imbued with meaning. Mother and daughter sat at the kitchen table, sharing a cup of chamomile tea, a ritual they had kept since Marina was a child. Silence between them was comfortable, full of mutual understanding. "Are you sure about what you're doing, honey?" Celia asked gently, her calloused hands holding the cup carefully. Marina thought for a moment before answering. She smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her tired face. "For the first time in a long time, Mom, I'm absolutely sure. I don't know if it will work. I don't know if I'll succeed. But I know it's what I have to do." Celia reached for her daughter's hand across the table. "You know it might be hard, right? That some people will criticize you, say you're too idealistic, too naive." "I know, Mom." Marina squeezed her mother's hand. "But you always taught me that the right path is rarely the easiest one, and that at the end of the day, you have to be able to look in the mirror without shame." Celia smiled, her eyes shining with proud tears. "Then you've already understood everything, my daughter, because sometimes the right path isn't the easiest, but it's the only one that lets us sleep in peace. It's the only one that makes it worthwhile to wake up the next day." They sat there for a while longer, talking about the extraordinary day, about Samuel, about Helen and her vision for a different kind of company. Celia shared stories from when she was young and worked as a housekeeper, of how she was treated differently depending on where she was, how some saw her as a person, others as furniture. "I understand now why this story touched you so much," Celia said, "because you saw in Samuel what I've lived my whole life. The difference between being seen and being invisible, between being respected and being discarded." Marina nodded, understanding another layer of her own decision. And that night, for the first time in weeks, Marina slept soundly, lulled by the certainty that she was, finally, in the right place, doing the right thing. And in the silent building, Samuel stayed late, sitting on that same bench where he had spent 4 days. He held Helen's letters in his hands, rereading every word, feeling her presence beside him. "I kept my promise, my love," he whispered into the emptiness. "I came back. I saw. And now I will rebuild, the way you always dreamed." And for the first time since Helen had passed, Samuel felt something beyond loss. He felt hope. 3 months had passed since the day that changed everything at the Pathways corporate tower. 3 months of transformation, resistance, learning, and rebuilding. And Marina was at the center of it all, learning every day what it meant to lead with her heart without losing her head. The July morning arrived cold in New York City. Marina entered the building at 7:30, as always, but now she was greeted in a completely different way. Danielle greeted her with a genuine smile. The security guards waved. The cleaning staff knew her name, and she knew theirs. "Good morning, Marina," called Mr. Joe, who was in charge of cleaning the ground floor. "How's your mother, Celia?" "She's doing well, Mr. Joe. She sent some cornbread for you. It's in the fridge on the 12th floor." The man smiled, touched. "Your mother is a blessing." Marina headed for the elevator, carrying a folder full of reports. But these weren't ordinary productivity reports. They were reports on well-being, satisfaction, implemented changes, and the human results achieved. On the 18th floor, Samuel was waiting for her in his office. He had formally resumed the presidency, but in a completely different way than Dr. Anderson had. His door was always open, literally. He had removed the frosted glass door and replaced it with just a light fabric curtain, which was always kept open. "Good morning, Marina. How was your weekend?" "Quiet, Mr. Pathways. I spent it with my mom. We cooked together and you." "I visited Helen's grave. I told her about everything we're doing." He smiled sadly. "I think she would be proud." Marina sat in the chair across from his desk. "I have the reports on the implemented changes. Should I present them now?" "Please." Marina opened the folder and began to share the numbers. Since Samuel had taken over and initiated the transformations based on Helen's letters, a lot had changed. First, the role-swapping program had begun. For 1 week, executives and managers worked in operational positions. They cleaned bathrooms, answered phones, organized files. The initial resistance had been enormous, but the results were undeniable. Leaders who had never spoken to entry-level employees now knew them by name, understood their struggles and respected their work. Richard Miller, the investor, had been one of the first to participate. He spent a week working at the reception desk and later wrote an email to the entire company saying he had learned more in that week than in years of board meetings. Second, the employee emergency fund was working. 3 people had already been helped, one with unexpected medical expenses, another with housing problems, a third with urgent family issues. None of them had to ask. The listening system they had created identified the needs and offered help with dignity, without humiliation. Third, real communication channels had been opened. Monthly town halls where any employee could speak directly with leadership. Suggestion boxes that were actually read and responded. To an ethics committee made up of people from different hierarchical levels. And fourth, the memorial was almost finished. Samuel listened to everything attentively. At the end, he asked only one question. "And the organizational climate? How are people feeling?" Marina smiled. "It's a slow change, Mr. Pathways. There's still resistance. There are still people who think all this is nonsense. But most are starting to believe that it's possible to be productive and humane at the same time." "And the financial results?" Marina hesitated. This was the tricky part. "We had a 5% drop in the first quarter. We lost 2 major clients who didn't agree with the new policies, but we gained 4 new clients who sought out the company specifically because of the change in values." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "And long-term?" "The projections are positive. Talent retention has increased dramatically. Productivity is rising because people are more engaged, and our reputation in the market is changing. We're being seen as pioneers." Samuel smiled. "Helen always said that doing the right thing is never bad business. It might take longer, but the foundations are more solid." It was at that moment that Samuel's assistant entered discreetly. "Sorry to interrupt, but Dr. Anderson is here. He asked to speak with you." Marina and Samuel exchanged surprised looks. Dr. Anderson hadn't been in the building since the day of the revelation, 3 months ago. "You can send him in," Samuel said. Dr. Anderson entered the office with hesitant steps, a far cry from the authoritative posture he had always maintained. He was thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes. He was wearing casual clothes, not his usual impeccable suit. "Mr. Pathways, Marina." He greeted them with a nod. "Dr. Anderson, please have a seat." Samuel gestured to a chair. The former director sat down, his hands nervously on his knees. "I came to apologize. Officially. Personally." The silence that followed was respectful. "I've spent these 3 months thinking," Dr. Anderson continued, his voice thick with emotion. "Thinking about everything I did, how I led, the people I hurt without realizing it. Or worse, realizing it, but not caring." Samuel listened without interrupting. "I started therapy. I began volunteering with a non-profit, helping young people from underserved communities get their first jobs. And I realized," he paused, struggling with his emotions, "I realized I had become the exact type of person I swore I would never be when I started my career." Dr. Anderson looked directly at Samuel. "You were right. I built numbers, but I broke people. and no success is worth that price. Marina felt her eyes sting. There was courage in that admission. "I didn't come to ask for my job back," Dr. Anderson clarified. "I know that chapter is closed. I came to ask for forgiveness, and to thank you for showing me what I had become before it was too late to change." Samuel stood up and walked over to Dr. Anderson. He placed a hand on his shoulder. "Recognition is the first step. Change is the work of a lifetime. But you've already taken the hardest step." Dr. Anderson nodded, the tears finally falling. "Thank you." Before leaving, Dr. Anderson looked at Marina. "And you, Marina, I'm sorry for not seeing your courage when I should have. You are exactly the kind of leader this company needs." After he left, Marina and Samuel sat in silence for a long moment. "Do you think he'll really be able to change?" Marina asked. Samuel returned to his chair. "I don't know, but he has a chance now. And sometimes a chance is all we need." The week continued with its transformed routines. On Wednesday, the first meeting of the new ethics committee took place. Marina participated as a facilitator. The group was diverse. There was a finance manager, a cleaning assistant, an IT analyst, the receptionist Danielle, and an intern. They discussed real, anonymized cases of ethical situations that had occurred in the company, not to punish, but to learn, to create better policies, to build a culture of shared responsibility. One of the discussions was about a manager who had yelled at a subordinate during a meeting. The committee decided he needed to undergo non-violent communication training and make a public apology, not as punishment, but as a collective learning experience. On Friday, the inauguration of the memorial took place. Samuel had hired a local artist to create an installation in the entrance hall. It was a bronze sculpture representing hands of different sizes and textures intertwined, forming a circle. And at the base, the phrase Helen had suggested in her letters, "Here, no one will be invisible again." The ceremony was simple but emotional. All employees were invited. Not just the executives, but everyone. From cleaning to the C-suite, from the intern to the CEO. Samuel gave a short speech. "Helen and I dreamed of a place where people mattered, where every individual was seen, respected, valued. This memorial is not about the past. It is a commitment to the future, a daily reminder of who we want to be." After him, Marina was invited to speak. She hadn't prepared anything, but the words came from the heart. 3 months ago, I was lost. I worked here, but I no longer knew why. Then I met Mr. Pathways sitting on that bench, right over there being ignored by everyone, and I had to choose between being one more person who pretends not to see or being someone who dares to see. I chose to see, and that choice changed my life. I hope this memorial reminds us every day to make that choice. The applause was warm, and Marina saw emotional faces, teary eyes, touched hearts. After the ceremony, there was a company-wide breakfast. There were no tables separated by hierarchy. Everyone mingled. Directors chatted with assistants. Managers shared stories with interns. For the first time, perhaps in decades, that building felt like a community, not just a corporation. Marina was pouring coffee when she felt a presence beside her. It was Jennifer, her former supervisor. They hadn't spoken since the day of the revelation. "Marina," Jennifer began, her voice hesitant, "can I talk to you?" "Of course." They moved a little away from the group. "I wanted to apologize," Jennifer said, avoiding Marina's eyes. "For everything. For being hard on you. For trying to silence you. For not seeing what you were seeing." Marina saw sincerity in her eyes. "Thank you for saying that, Jennifer. It means a lot." "I'm trying to change, you know," Jennifer continued. "I participated in the role-swapping program last week. I worked in the archives in the basement, and I realized I had never spoken to the people who work there. I didn't even know their names, and they do essential work." Marina lightly touched Jennifer's arm. "Changing isn't easy, but the fact that you're trying already shows a lot." Jennifer nodded, her eyes shining. "You were always stronger than I realized, or than I wanted to admit." The two hugged, a brief but meaningful embrace. It was the healing of a wound, the beginning of a new relationship based on mutual respect. The following months brought more changes. The company started making news. Business journals wrote about the innovative model of Pathways Consulting. Some publications were critical, calling it utopian and unsustainable. Others celebrated it, seeing it as the future of business. Universities invited Samuel and Marina to give lectures. They always accepted, but they made a point of also bringing employees from different levels to share their experiences. At one of these lectures at NYU, a business student raised his hand. "But what if your competitors don't adopt this model? Won't you end up losing market share?" Samuel smiled. "Perhaps, but we might also inspire change. And even if we don't, at least we will have lived according to our values. And that, to me, is worth more than any market share." Marina added, "Besides, we're proving that it's possible, that humanity and productivity are not opposites, that treating people well isn't charity, it's intelligence, and the numbers are starting to prove it." Indeed, in the fourth quarter, the financial results exceeded expectations. The company not only recovered from the initial dip, but grew. New contracts came in, clients who wanted to be associated with a brand with values, talent who wanted to work in a place that respected them. But the biggest impact was internal. Employee turnover dropped drastically. Engagement soared. The organizational climate surveys showed numbers never before achieved. People weren't there just for the paycheck. They were there because they believed in the purpose. 1 year after the revelation, Samuel called a special meeting. It was a symbolic day, the anniversary of Helen's passing. Gathered in the auditorium, all the employees watched as Samuel took the stage, carrying Helen's letters. "Today marks 1 year since I fulfilled the promise I made. To my wife," he began. 1 year since I returned disguised as someone invisible to test if we were still capable of seeing humanity. And what I found was painful, but I also found hope. I found people like Marina who risked everything to do what was right." He paused, looking at the letters. Helen left several instructions in these letters, and today I want to share the last one, the most important one. The silence was absolute. She wrote, "Samuel, my love, if you have made it this far, it is because you have found people worthy of continuing our legacy. Do not cling to control, trust, pass the baton. Let the new generation carry forward what we started, but with their own hands, their own hearts." Samuel looked directly at Marina. "Therefore, today I announce that I will be stepping down from the role of CEO. I will continue as an advisor, but the operational leadership will pass to new hands, hands that understand both management and humanity." He smiled. "Marina Hayes will be the new CEO of Pathways Consulting." The auditorium erupted in applause. Marina was in shock, her hands trembling, her heart racing. She looked at Samuel, who gestured for her to come up on stage. On shaky legs, Marina walked up. When she stood beside Samuel, he whispered, "You're ready. Helen told me how to recognize the right person, and you are that person." Marina took the microphone, still processing everything. She looked out at the audience and saw familiar faces. Danielle, Mr. Joe, Jennifer, Richard Miller, so many people with whom she had shared this journey. "I don't know if I'm ready," she began honestly, "but I know I will give my all to honor the trust that Mr. Pathways and Helen placed in this company, to honor each and every one of you. I will make mistakes, certainly, but I will make them while trying to do the right thing, not the easy thing." She took a deep breath. "Our commitment continues. Here, no one will be invisible. Every person matters. Every voice deserves to be heard. And we will continue to prove that it is possible to build success without sacrificing our soul." The applause was deafening. Marina felt tears roll down her face, but they were tears of gratitude, of purpose, of hope. After the meeting, Marina and Samuel sat on the bench in the lobby, the same bench where it had all begun a year ago. "Are you scared?" Samuel asked. "Terrified," Marina admitted, "but I'm also hopeful and determined." Samuel smiled. "Helen always said that the difference between courage and recklessness is that courage is accompanied by conscious fear. You're scared, but you're doing it anyway. That's courage. They sat there for a few minutes in comfortable silence, watching the activity in the building. People greeting each other, genuine smiles, real conversations, humanity in action. "You know," Marina said softly, "sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't stopped that day to really look at you." Samuel thought for a moment. Someone eventually would have. There's always someone. The question is whether they would have looked in time. You looked at the right moment. Marina nodded, understanding the depth of those words. That night, Marina went home with a full heart. Celia was waiting for her with a special dinner. Mother and daughter celebrated not with words, but with each other's presence, with gratitude for the journey they had traveled. And in the Pathways corporate tower, under the soft glow of the lights, the memorial shone. Hands, intertwined in bronze, a phrase engraved in stone, "Here no one will be invisible again." It was more than a promise. It was a daily commitment, a constant choice, a living legacy. Samuel visited Helen's grave that night. He placed fresh flowers and sat on the grass beside the headstone. "I kept your promise, my love, and I found the right person to carry on. You would be so proud of her." He smiled through his tears. "Marina has your heart, Helen, and she will take your dream even further than we ever could." The wind blew gently, rustling, the leaves of the trees around them, and for a moment Samuel felt Helen's presence beside him, as if she were smiling, content, at peace. The journey was complete, the promise fulfilled, and the legacy secured in hands that understood that the greatest wealth is not found in the numbers on a spreadsheet, but in how we treat those who have nothing to offer us in return. Because in the end, what defines a company, a life, a society, are not its measurable successes. They are the moments when we choose to see the invisible, listen to the silenced, and embrace the forgotten. And that choice, made day after day, person by person, transforms not just organizations, but the entire world. End of story. Hey everyone, we hope the story of Samuel, Helen, and Marina touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of transformation, courage, and humanity, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment resonated with you the most. Was it Samuel's revelation, Marina's courage, Helen's letters? Every day we bring you intense and true stories like this one, revealing the deepest and most human side of our existence. Stories that remind us that small choices can change entire destinies. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will touch your soul and make you reflect on your own choices. See you soon.